land for 1 second as we talk and dive into scopes and closures. So, what do we know about scope right now? Specifically, scope in the way that Ruby handles scope, right? Is this valid Ruby? Right? I could just put, hey, I'm going to define a method, and then it's going to be just say name. It's going to simply put say name, right? Can I just invoke this method by doing this? Do I have to do this? No, but can I? Yes, you're so used to that Ruby syntactical sugar that you don't even realize that this is like actually invoking, and this is also invoking it in Ruby. Cool? So let's take a look just to see what that would be. All right? So here, and what is this called? What's that file called? Scope. So I can just simply Ruby scope.rb. And what would happen? Your boy comes out. Right? Before I get any further, I've been told that because I changed to the dark theme, because I didn't want to do that blind thing that I did to you last time, is it hard to see the code with the dark theme? Is anyone, raise your hand if it's hard to see the code. Raise your hand if you prefer it this way. Okay, so I'll leave it then unless there's any, all right, good deal. So, this is totally legal, right? If, however, I were to say name equals to, right? What's a cool name? Mike. Chris and Mike. Those are cool names, right? Can I simply put name in here? What do you mean no? Very good. Why? It's out of scope. You say that, right? It's because this method does not have access to methods defined and declared outside of the method in Ruby. Does that make sense? So what will happen here if I were to run this method? It's saying it's undefined, meaning name is not defined here, right? Can I just do name equals something here, and then will that work? Perfectly fine, right? How can I get this name inside this method? I can pass it in, right, as an argument, and then simply refer to the argument that I'm going to pass in. So now what do I need to do with this? I need to pass in the name variable from up here, right, which would be put in here, so I'm going to put what's actually here, right? Nothing wild, right? Hopefully. We're in mod 3 right now, like, you know, you should know that. Great, so what happens if I run it? Chris and Mike. So notice how Ruby does its scope. Cool? Now let's take a look at how JavaScript runs its scope. A little different. Remember, a lot of these are just going to be like examples that are included in the README, and if anything jumps up, I will add it to the README. I'm just going to go ahead and like walk through how it's done. So, in JavaScript, we're going to do this. Let's get rid of this real quick. Cool. Here, I have a variable, const shirt, and it says shaped like a T, which is why it's called the T-shirt. Cool. And then I just have a function called print shirt. Let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of this. And let's see if I can simply console log shirt. When I run print shirt, do I have access to shirt inside this function when it was declared up here and then invoked out here? Who says yes? Who says no? Great. So Ruby and JavaScript are different, right? So let's simply take a look. Oh, great. I just realized this whole thing. That's okay. This is what we'll do. Cool. Ready? Let's get a little bit of this. A little bit of this. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Cool. Just going to get rid of that. Who thinks this will run? What should I see when I run this? What the? That's weird. What the? I said enter. Clowns. Great. Unbelievable. Cool. It's because they're all defined already. Here, let's do this. They're all defined already in there. Cool? No, because it's going to be loading my JavaScript code. Right? Cool. There we go. Is that better? Why do I have access to shirt here, even though it was never defined inside this print shirt function, and it was only declared and assigned outside of the scope of this function and then invoked? This right here was defined on the global scope, right? So what this means is, on this line, do I see anything wrapping all of this code? No, I don't, right? It is simply declared out of the wild, and nothing is wrapping it. So that means that it is declared in the global scope. So I'll have access to it globally, which is different than how Ruby does it, because how does Ruby do global? I can simply add a $sign here, right? I cannot pass in the argument, and then I can put $sign name. I don't need this extra argument, and that will run. I'm making a global variable, so it's available regardless of the scope that was defined in. Are there any questions on the difference between Ruby scope so far and JavaScript scope? Cool. So I have this. What happens if I were to say there was another const shirt inside this function, and it's called new shirt? I have to. Why did we use shirt? It's very easy to trip up saying that and say something else. It's just dangerous. What will console log shirt be in this scope? New shirt. Who says new shirt? Why? Who says I can even do this? Illegal or legal? Is that even legal, though? It might be. Great. Let's find out. Here, I'm simply going to define shirt again inside this print shirt function. And simply, I'm going to invoke print shirt. Is new shirt. So an important term I want you to understand is something called the lexical environment. Sounds like a very big term. Who thinks they have an idea of what the lexical environment means?
It means like the statement is, I don't know.
That's okay.
This is where it's cold. Like read where at the block it's cold in. So if it was something cold in the global, it would have read the shirt equal shape like T. But since it's cold inside the curly braces, it will read inside first and then look outside.
Yes. This is how, right? I'm going to like summarize it. So if you didn't like fully hear that or understand it, I'm going to try it again. But that's very good. How I defined it and where I defined it is what has access to it. That is sort of the lexical environment. The way you could think about it is anything that is lexical, lexicon, whatever, is referring to words. So if I say lexicon, just think of words. And environment, you understand, is like what houses everything. So if I think of this word environment, so this lexical environment, then I can really start to understand what that really means. Here we're talking about lexical scoping, specifically what's available where and when it was defined. And so if I define shirt in the global, this function has access to it. If I redefine or create a new variable in this scope, it will first read within this scope, and then if this does not exist, it will look up and out for another variable of that same name. And it will find shirt here and then console log this. So lexical environment, where something is written is where it's defined and what has access to it. Cool? Just like this word environment. Cool? That being said, if I were to say console log shirt, oops, right here, and then I console log shirt out here, what will this line 9 console log return? This one, right? Because this is only available within the function. Does that make sense? So if I were to define a new one, like pants, right, equals blue jean baby, right? Can I console log pants? Who says yes? Who says no? Great. Yes, you cannot console log pants here because it is not available inside what? The global scope. It is only available within this function scope. Does that make sense? Is there any confusion between global scope and function scoping so far, and how JavaScript runs its scope slightly differently than Ruby scope, and what access it has and what access it has to variables? A little tricky, a little different, right? You'll get used to it. This is actually a little bit better. Cool? Good deal. So let's keep going. Boop, boop, boop. This is just like the official definition. I'm not going to read it at you, but if you're looking for the specific terminology for how this is done, this is how it's read, right? So it refers to the fact that lexical scoping uses the location where it is declared is what it has access to. Cool? Lexical meaning word, just like your word environment and your word scope. What do you have access to? Cool. So this is really the same thing we kind of just went over. Boop, boop, boop. Great. What I want to talk about now is the 3 different types of scope that JavaScript provides. So the first thing we talked about is global, right? If I just set a const here and it's not being wrapped in anything, it's not inside a function, it is available globally. So everything that is defined afterwards will have access to global name. If I wanted to go all the way to the bottom of this doc and console log global name, will I have access to it? Yeah. Will I have access to it inside any function that I define afterwards? Yeah. Yes. If I were to put, let's say, a function like right here, do I have access to global name? Yeah. Right. Great. We talked a little bit about function scope, and we're just going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into it. So here, between these curly braces, right, is where this function is defined. We talked about this const toppings here. If I were to invoke it, do you think that it creates this const toppings outside the scope for me? So if I were to do something like this, can I invoke pizza, right, which again returns undefined y? Exactly, there is no keyword return, so it's not actually spitting out a return value. Now that I've invoked it, which all it does is it declares a variable, do I have access to toppings now? Can I just call toppings? Right? Maybe, right? That's kind of weird. So, right here inside this function scope, even though when I execute it, all it does is declare a variable, when I invoke it, you would imagine that it declared that variable for me, but I still do not have access to it outside of that function scope. Does that make sense? Cool. Was that example kind of useful? Awesome. Great. The next thing is something called block scoping. Here you could just literally add a block anywhere you want, and it will wrap inside anything I declare. Will I have access to fish out here? The answer is no. Right? This is what is known as a block. It looks just like an object, right? If I were to do something like this, and I were to put keys, and I were to put values. So this is an object. This is sort of like a block. This is the idea that it's being wrapped between these curly brackets. And they have their own scope. The problem and the reason you'll never see this is because how do I reference this? How would I later on access this object? Never. I just wasted memory space. Does that make sense? But this is important to know as we start to get into nested functions, right? And they have their own lexical environment and their own lexical scope and what they have access to inside nested functions. Cool? So if I were, however, to say that const O is equal to this key value pair, will I have access to hello and hi? Can I console log hello? This key right here. No. Why? Because it's wrapped inside this block. I can only get access to it if I refer to the object that it's wrapped in. So I can do o.hello. Does that make sense? I would get world, yes. Is this a better example of your better understanding of block scoping? Why I can't get access to it unless I enter inside the block or this object? Can you explain global scope, function scoping, and block scoping to your partner? Would you be able to do that? But more specifically, if you can't verbalize it, can you write an example and show what is and what is not available in each of those functions, in each of those scopes, rather? Just a quick thumbs up or thumbs down about scoping. Awesome. Great. Good deal. Cool. So, some of you have heard me already say var is not great, almost on the recording, and that we should not be using it anymore. So, I hinted at this earlier in this morning's lecture, and that is we now use something called modern JavaScript. So, let's not put the cart before the horse, yeah? Actually, you know what? Doesn't matter. Cool. Let us do this, right? Someone give me a variable name. What is any variable you want? Var. Whoa, that's wild. Huh? Turtles? Huh. Something about this class. Cool. Anything? What does it point to? Huh? All right. Nice try. You like that? I wasn't going to write all of that. Out of control. Now I have, what is this portion right here? Just this left side. What is that called in JavaScript? I'm declaring, all right? And what is this part? The assignment. I am declaring and then assigning in the same line, right? So if I were to say turtles, I'm getting back a particular value. So if I were to say var, like declared, like bankruptcy, what did I just do? I just simply made some memory, I do declare, but it has no value. So naturally, did I spell it wrong? I spelled it. Very good, thank you. Cool. The point I'm trying to make is, it comes back as undefined. Is that surprising to you? No, it works as intended. Can I then just do, after it has been declared, assign it to something? Right? Remember this? Nobody watches The Office? Just me. So I can declare it and then assign it later. Or I could declare and assign at the same time. Can I re-declare and simultaneously reassign at the same time? Can I do this? Can I use var again, same variable name, and assign it a different value? Let's check out turtles. That's who thinks that that's good? Who thinks that that could cause some weird bugs? Right? You should not be able to declare and assign again the same variable. You should just be able to declare it once and then possibly reassign its value if needed, right? So var has some weird things so far. So var can, and this is in the notes, can be redeclared and reassigned as many times as you want. That's just one weird thing about var. Cool? Let's take a look at let. Anything particular you guys want to do? Let's just stick with pets. Cool. Doggo. All right, this is my doggo. The Cooksters. Cool? Aw. Can I do let doggo again into bad boy, bad doggo? What does that error say? It's already been declared. I cannot re-declare it. However, doggo equals to bestest boy, oh boy, boy, oh boy. Will that work? So let can only be declared once, but reassigned multiple times. So far, so good. Can you describe the difference between var and let? Right? Can I do this? Let doggo. I'm sorry, let catto, right? No one says that, right? And then catto equals, right? Knock over stuff. That's why I don't like cats. Can I do catto? I can. I can declare it and assign it separately. Cool? Let's take a look at the last one. Old const action, right? Man, I've done a lot of stuff. Spaceship. Oh yeah. Equals to what? What? Voyage? Voyage? Voyager. Cool. Can I do spaceship equals to, I don't know. What's one? The Apollo? Can I reassign this spaceship? Interesting. Can I just const right over that thing? Spaceship equals to right over that thing. Oh, wow. I was wondering why I didn't throw an error. I was like, uh-oh. Sport. Cool. Will that run? Why? This and this are different error messages, right? What does that tell you? Const cannot be redeclared, and it cannot be reassigned. Versus let, which cannot be redeclared, but can be reassigned, and var can do anything you want because it's trash, right? Are there any questions on the differences between var, let, and const? Okay, var gets worse, right? And we'll see in a little bit. Yeah? So, if I know that a const cannot be redeclared or reassigned, if I were to const, and I'm just going to store some memory, so memory, please, and I don't assign it a value, and I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to block off some memory, and I'll assign a value later, can I do that?
No.
Well, obviously, yeah. All right, thanks, Google clowns. It will not let me because I must assign and declare a const at the same time. Because when you really think about it, what's going to happen next if this code were to properly execute? I would then have to do something like this, right? And I know that I cannot assign it again. So when you're using const, you must assign and declare at the same time. Cool? Any questions on that? Noise. Let's take a look at all the cool examples in the README, right? Just going to go over it one more time. var can be declared and reassigned as many times as I want. Does that statement make sense to you? Right? var tomato sauce. I'm taking the variable tomato and I'm changing it. Can I assign this now to something else? Maybe a function. Totally, because var can do whatever you want. It's trash. It's dirtbag, right? Now, if I were to console log tomato, what should I see? I should see a reference to a function. And no longer these strings. Right? If this is a function, can I do something like tomato? Tomato. I can't spell. Bloop, bloop. Who says yes? Yes, you can, right? Because it is a reference to a function. Sweet. Let can be reassigned but not redeclared. Does that statement make sense to you now? Yeah. Cool, right? I could simply, excuse me. Whoa, weird. I could simply let pairs equal to a green and kind of mushy, okay? Then I can take the variable that I have declared already and reassign it. I cannot do this. I cannot redeclare pairs. This will break. Cool? Let's talk about const. Where is that? Const can neither be redeclared nor reassigned. Does that make sense to you? Good. I haven't.
Like the uppercase of the routine.
Kind of. Similar. Remember, redeclared and reassigned is different from mutated or changed. And we'll get into that here in a little bit. Cool? So I have a const apple. I cannot reassign it, and I cannot redeclare it. Now, here's the weird thing. Let's just say you are still stuck in Ruby land, and that's okay, right? Do I have a var, let, or const here? No. Where do you think I have access to driver now? If I say that without var, less, and const, it will become global. Shrug. Do I have access to driver? Oh, dang, it didn't work. Dang. Yeah, my snippet, I broke it, it's fine. Do I have access to driver here? Yeah, whatever. I'm sorry. I gotta fix my snippets. Cool. Do I have access to driver here? Absolutely, because I done goofed. All right? This is essentially the same as saying var here. Which should throw some of you for a weird face. Like, you should be like, wait, what do you mean var? Why do I have access to it outside? All right? What you really think is, let driver. Do I have access to driver here? Cool. Let's find out. Let's play the game. Cool, right? Do I have access to driver? Know it. What the? Oh, that's right. Sorry.
When does driver get set?
That's right. I've defined it inside this function, but because I've never invoked this function, this never gets declared. Sorry. Boop, boop. Yeah. Let's declare the driver. Wow, what a aptly named function. Ready? What does this do again? This just tells me what's in the function, right? If I invoke it, as I alluded to earlier, all it does is declares this variable and assigns it. Do I have access to driver now?
Yeah.
Dang. Chrome is too smart.
We never used to do that. That's a recent thing.
It is a new thing. Chrome is great. So, what does that say? If you forget let and const, it will automatically declare it in the global scope. Now, let's try this. Ready? Function var is great. Is it though? Cool. And I simply did the same thing. Oh. Bloop, bloop. Cool. If you hold shift enter, it adds that extra return in the console. As opposed to just hitting enter, where it will not read as return carriage, but simply execute the code. I can do let awesome equal to awesemo. Cool. If I did var is great and I invoked it, do you think I would access to awesome? I don't. Let me try var is great. Really? Cool. That should be capital R. Really? Ah, embarrassing. Let's try really with two Y's. What I'm trying to do is assign this as var. Cool? If I say var is really great with two Y's and I invoke it, what do you think happens? Yo, Andrew, shouldn't I? Oh, yeah. Ja. Remixed. Cool. Wow, just redefine that function. Powerful. Ridiculous. Let's do this. Great. That's correct. That is correct. That is correct. Yeah, I try not to mix up var and let. That is what I wanted. Huh? Wait until we get into nested functions. Cool? I wanted to point this out just so you could see it. Cool?
So you're saying that it doesn't have access to the variable?
Correct. Wait until we get into the nested function, and then you'll see it.
So before you said that there was the same, and then you were like, we should have stupid lookup places. You're like, what?
Yeah, I messed up. Because
Oh.
it's only for nested
Okay,
functions.
sorry.
No, that's cool. Yeah, you ready? Let's keep going. Are there any questions on var let const?
Is there any time you want to use
Not in modern JavaScript. The use case for var is so small now that you would have to know exactly what you're doing in terms of understanding scope for what var and let do. So the answer is not entirely no, but basically no. You can get away with let and const everywhere, and you'll see the problems with var in a second. Are there any questions? Any other questions?
Just to be clear, when you made that Ruby earlier, you didn't put a bar or
Yeah.
you were able to call it outside the scope.
You talking about this?
Yeah, that's worse than var even. I mean,
This is worse than var.
really bad.
Super worse.
That's the only chance it's available.
Right.
outside,
Yeah, it will be available outside. Driver will exist here.
Yeah. If you forget var letter const, it will become a global variable. It's one of those kind of like, it's JavaScript. What to heck doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Cool. All right, so we have the var let const. Boop, boop, boop. All right.
Would you be able to redefine driver?
Would I be able to redefine
It's
driver?
a global variable. Like,
Yes.
outside that function, you can redefine it. And then
Yes. I can reassign what driver is.
If you called that
Say again?
If you call this function, right,
Mhm.
and then you access driver, it'll print that data by function.
Yes.
And you reassign the driver,
Yes.
and then you call the function again.
It'll reassign driver.
It'll reassign it and it'll set that new data.
Mhm.
Okay.
It'll return back to Dell.
It'll reassign it back to Dale Earnhardt Jr. Yeah. Do you see how this can introduce a lot of bugs? Like your inputs and your outputs are not reliable. Yeah? Oh, JavaScript. Great. All right. Something you've probably heard of before and been introduced to in the labs called hoisting. Who understands hoisting?
It sounds like the compiling process where goes over all your code, picks up variables and puts them into memory. Then the execution portion goes over all the reps, something like that. It literally hoists them up for to say, okay, yeah, things don't have to be necessarily in order anymore. You can call a function even though it's down here.
Kind of. Yeah. Yes.
So it refers to what it feels like the code is doing and moving things above other parts of your code. But reality, it's actually doing, the compiler is doing two steps. First is reading your code, and then it's going through it and executing your code in the order it appears on the page.
The order it appears on the page. Yes. All right. So I'm going to take a quick aside note here to explain how JavaScript is running your code, and that should explain what hoisting is doing. Cool? And why the phenomenon of hoisting happens. So allow me to explain it, and then we'll see some examples. We'll run through how that explanation works, and then you'll let me know whether or not you understand hoisting. Is that fair? Cool. So the first thing JavaScript does is it will read through all of your code, line for line. There are 2 times that JavaScript will execute your code. Cool. The first time it executes your code, and I put that in quotes, is what it really does is it runs through something known as a syntax parser. What that is doing is it is running your code and reading it line for line, character for character, and so that it understands what you are doing. It sees C-O-N-S-T space, S-H-I-R-T space. Immediately, because I have constant here, JavaScript understands that it is a reserved keyword followed by a space, meaning that this in fact is going to be a const. Whatever follows this space will be the variable that I want for this constant, and it will end in another space or a separate operator. So there's no difference between these two. So after it reads C-O-N-S-T space, it will see S-H-I-R-T, and then either a space or an equal sign, and recognize that the last characters up until this space is going to be the name for my variable, and then it stores it in memory. Are there any questions as to what that means and how that happened in the first run-through? It does that for every single thing. So it'll see function, followed by a space. Okay, great. Whatever's coming through will either be an anonymous function, which we can declare later, or it will be a named function. And it knows where the end of this name is because it sees these first set of open parentheses. If you were to do this and delete this, what will your code say? It will say, what is the next thing in here? Space, curly bracket. It will probably say unexpected token, expecting, close parentheses, got, open bracket. Does those error messages make sense now? That's what is happening. So these are known as tokens. So when it says unrecognized token, because you did not bring in this curly brace, you deleted it by accident, it will still think this whole thing is a part of a function. And because I never close it literally anywhere, eventually, when I come down, let's say I forgot this exact closing bracket. I will read through this code. I will see function, sure, I can nest functions. And then I'll see this, and then I'll see this open, and then this close. I'll run through the whole thing, and it will say what? Probably unexpected identifier, unexpected end of input, expecting this close bracket. Because it's like you forgot the end statement in Ruby. Does that make sense? That's how JavaScript will read through, transpile your code, and then it will execute. So the first thing it does is anything that is a var, let, or const, it will see this, see the equal sign, and stop. Why? Why would that make sense as someone reading through this code that has limited amount of memory? Well, I'm going to assign this to memory, right? Let's just say I read through this, saw this equal, and assigned this to memory. Can this ever change? Not as a string, but what if this was an object? Can I add in extra key value pairs? Great. Does it make sense to store this and then know that very possibly later on line 79, it's going to change? Right? It's crazy. So if it sees var, let, or const, it will see this assignment operator, and immediately go, cool, bro, undefined. And then it will continue running through your code. That's how it stores. It just simply allocates a space in memory, and it does not assign it the value yet. Right? Are there any questions as to what I just said about JavaScript reading your code first, running it through that syntax parser, and then executing your code line for line afterwards? Who says they understand that? Great. So here's what happens. Let's do this. Everything underneath I'm just going to comment out. Oh no. Ooh, cool. That way we're all on the same page. Cool. So you're going to see a bunch of like console logs because of everything I had above here. But here, I'm simply declaring happy. Who thinks happy exists up here? If I log happy and then define it afterwards. Well, let's find out. First, let's get rid of this. And let's take a look whether or not happy exists here. Does it exist on line 108? Absolutely. Because 106, it is being declared and assigned. So let's actually take a look. Great. So we have happy here. And notice on line 108, we have Cowboy Bob. Right? So far, so good. If I were to console log happy here, what do you think will happen based literally on the explanation I told you of how JavaScript will run through your code? Who says it will break? Who says it will say undefined? Remember, it reads through everything, sees var happy, goes cool. Because vars can be assigned and redeclared at will, it doesn't waste the time to store whatever you have here. It will just put it at undefined temporarily. And then, when it runs through again, it's going to execute 104. It's going to execute 106, actually assign the value, and then execute 108 happy. So what should I see on 104 and 108? 104 I should see undefined, and then 108 I should see happy. Cool? That's what hoisting is. It does not physically move your code. But when JavaScript runs through and reads it, it will assign certain things to memory and then move on. And then after everything has been allocated in memory, it will then execute your code line for line. Are there any questions as to how JavaScript runs and reads and understands your code? So if I say that JavaScript runs through your code twice, will you think that I'm a psycho? No. Will that make sense to you?
Yes.
So can you explain hoisting? Right? JavaScript runs through your code twice. The first time is it takes all the variables, assigns them a location in memory, and gives them temporarily undefined until it hits it the second time, in which case it will actually assign a value to that location in memory, which is your variable. Are there any questions on that? That's like the key point of hoisting, and it will bite you over and over if you use var. Great. So let's do this. That's what var does. Can I do something like let, awesome. Actually, let's use something else, right? It's bitten me before. Sharks. Very good. Let sharks equal to threat to the internet. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Great. Can I console log sharks?
Yes.
Cool. What should I see on line 112? Threat to the internet. Right? Very good. Thank you. Nobody make fun of me. Can I console log shark? No. This inter. Ah, that feels so good. Great. Can I console log sharks here? Sharks is not defined. Cool. Can I do, instead of let, can I const that bad boy? What will happen? What will happen here on 113? Threats to the internet. What will happen on 110? Let's just hit. It is not defined because const and let do not hoist. Const and let do not hoist. Does anyone see a benefit to using const and let over var so far?
Yeah.
Cool? Great. Now, that's just const and let and hoisting. What about functions? Can I invoke this function before it is defined?
Yes.
What will happen if I invoke it after it is defined? What happens here on 122? Huh? Mo, Larry, and Curly over there? Oh, great. Sorry, just kidding. But what happens when I do this? What should I expect to see, or rather, what do you think will happen? Function keywords hoist. Function keywords hoist. So what two things do you know right now will hoist? Var and function keywords. Cool? Sweet. So I know that I can define a function two ways. I can do it this way. I can also do let cool function equals to a function keyword man, so cool. So cool. Can I cool, how do I invoke this right here? Cool function with parentheses, right? Great. What should I see on 125? Man, so cool. So far, so good? What happens when I do this? Because let does not hoist. Knowing what I know, if I said var, what will happen to cool function in that invocation? Remember, var cool function equals, what will the syntax parser assign this to? What are your questions? Correct. So, it's kind of like a tricky thing, right? If I console log, cool function, what does var do? It stops reading after the equal sign. That's what var will do, right? If I invoke something that is undefined, what will happen? The error. It is not a function. Again, var hoists, so it will say undefined. So a reference to it will simply mean undefined. And I cannot invoke it prior to. Cool?
What if we make like a Ruby mistake and we are constant?
What do you mean? If I make it in the global?
Yeah, then it'll voice.
Well, in the global, it does the same thing, right? So like, oops, that's not gonna work.
So like,
I don't think you could do this. Yeah, let's see cool function. Did I spell it wrong? Bloop. Let me just get rid of this. Bloop. Yeah. Should be fine. The global should define it as undefined, right, Andrew? The global? Yeah, this should come up as undefined, but it doesn't.
Oh, wait, where are you? On,
The global.
you're saying 122 is giving you what's 122 saying?
That it's not defined, not undefined.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that's the new one.
Huh.
It should be undefined, but I think that modern browsers
No,
interpret
wait,
it
yeah.
as
I would imagine if you tried it with var, it would work fine.
correct. Yeah.
Right, okay. So it's the var keyword specifically.
Var keyword specifically?
Yeah, just because we're like, if we were to do this inside of a function, right, or a block or whatever, cool function would be global, but it wouldn't necessarily be hoisted because to my, as far as I'm aware, it's the function keyword in var specifically.
That hoist? Okay. I thought globals as well. Honestly, you will almost never use globals unless you are writing a package. Basically, if you're writing like a Ruby gem, then like you would have specific ways to have like access to all your variables. We do not operate with global variables defined in this way in JavaScript. So yeah, it behaves a little strangely. So it does not hoist. Global variables, not without var, do not hoist. Huh. Yeah.
So hoisting like a function, like that seems to make sense because you can use it for some reason, but what is the var doing the undefined just like a weird symptom of var, or is there some?
It's a weird symptom of var, right? It's designed so that when you use var all over your code, originally before ES6, before modern JavaScript, before 2015 JavaScript, the only thing that was available was either this global or var keyword. And so it would hoist so that wherever you used var, you can call it above in your code. So that all your variables were available to you at some point. So it didn't break your code, yeah.
ES5 or something like that would have actually printed out whatever that var was? Like it would have
Yes.
the value of it?
Yes. Cool. Are there any questions on hoisting right now? Just var and just function keyword. Does everyone understand hoisting? And like what's happening because of the way JavaScript is running and executing your code? Yeah? Awesome. Boop, boop, boop. Alrighty. Here we go. This is the one. So, we have a function called hoist var, right? And all it does is it console logs name. If true, right? Will this run true, yes or no? Yes, because I'm basically forcing it to be true, right? I'm going to declare a variable with var keyword named Jimmy, and I'm simply going to console log name again. What will name be here, and what will name be here? Remember, I'm using the var keyword. What is 147 and one is 151? Let's find out.
Jimmy all over.
Wait, did I spell it wrong? Oh, did I not save it? Unbelievable. Ignore this one, because that's the return value of the function, right? It's undefined and then Jimmy. So even inside the scope of a function, var will what? Var will hoist. Are there questions as to how this happened? Because you understand JavaScript now, right? You should have been able to at least assume that it was possible that this initial console log name would become undefined. Because we're using the var keyword, because the code ran through everything first before it executed line for line. So var on line 147 during the second actual execution phase of JavaScript recognized that name, the variable, existed inside this function. And then what? Assign it to undefined. If true, which will always run true, actually assign this variable a value, and then when it console logged it again, it had that value. And you saw that third undefined because this function does not do what? It does not return anything. Cool? Are there any questions on this var? If I were to use let or const, what will happen here? It will error. Cool?
So does the compiler assign functions that do not have a return statement? Do they assign like the return statement undefined? Is that what it's doing as well?
It just simply returns undefined because I never assign it a return value. I never said return something. Yeah, if it doesn't find the return keyword, it'll just return undefined. All right? Cool? Meaning, if I were to do something like let, I don't know, TV equal this function, what will TV be?
TV is the whole function.
TV is a whole function. What if I invoke TV?
TV will without the parentheses.
TV with the parentheses, what happens? What happens with this? What is this? A reference to the function. What is this? Undefined. Because this function does not return anything. Cool? Don't forget those return statements. They get out of control. They get out of control. Great. Do you guys want to break, or do you want to just push through first-class functions, higher-order functions, and closures?
I have a question.
Sure.
If we have a variable name defined above the function itself, does the line 147 read it?
Yeah. If I had something like let name equals to something, right? When it comes across this, the first time it runs, it will be something, right? can you do let and var on the same thing? I think we just did that, right? And it like totally took it. It'll read name Jimmy from this var. Let's find out. I've never actually run into this bizarre problem. You guys know what I'm talking about? So let's var name equals to cool, and then let name equals to not cool. Huh. Huh.
Oh, let's try to redeclare it now.
Yeah. Well, now I can't because I letted it.
Right.
Well, no, I can redeclare it. I can't if I constated it, it would not like that. Interesting.
Oh yeah, can you redeclare it with?
Redeclared. Redect.
Yeah, let's try to let
Ooh.
Here's a single double quote. Try to let.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that was embarrassing. Yeah, I was like, ooh, that is bizarre. Cool. Yeah, looks like it'll just override it. What a punk. Do not mix your vars, lets, and consts. Just basically remove var from your vocabulary. Understand that it can hoist. Understand that it is not block scoped. Yeah? Yeah? I'm getting like nothing. All right, cool. So var, let, const. Yeah?
Yeah.
Great. Great. Good deal. So let's move on then. Unless you guys want to break. Thumbs up for break. All right, cool. Cool beans. All right, let's take a short. Earlier I mentioned something called block scoping, right? And I said that const and let are block scoped. What I mean by that is inside here, do you think I have access to something inside the block?
Yeah.
Var will give me access to this inside this block. However, let and const do not. Now this will not work. Does that make sense to you? Because this is a block. Let's do this. Is that easier to read? Right? Code indentation is very crucial. So this will not work because let is block scoped, meaning it only exists inside this block. However, var is not block scoped, therefore it is available outside the block. Cool. That wasn't a very practical example, but that will define what block scoping means. When I say that let and const are block scoped, does it mean just a little bit more to you now? Cool? So let's take out that, and let's do this. I have a for loop here, right? You understand for loops? We did the readmes, powerful class. A for loop is just a way to iterate over things. That being said, I have this var, which is the old way we did it, and I have I equals to 0. When it's less than 10, I plus plus. I have a console log I inside the loop, and I have a console log I outside the loop. What do you think I will be here and here? Do you see that? In this for loop, right, which is self-contained block of code, I will exist inside and outside of this for loop. Can you imagine how that might be frustrating? Wouldn't it be nice if I had a variable here that was block scoped so that nothing exists outside of here, outside? Does the block scope of let and const make more sense to you?
Yeah.
Right? That's a very practical reason why we should always be using let or const. That being said, what does this I plus plus mean?
I equals I plus.
Right. So I equals I plus 1. Because I'm reassigning, I should be using let. What happens if I const this thing?
That won't work.
The first time I equals I plus 1, what will happen? it'll say, hey, what are you doing? You can't reassign this const. Stop the madness. So this for loop, the best variable to use is going to be let. Do you know why now? Can you explain it? Great. So again, just one more pro for let and const over var. Great. So block scoping, practical, over. Great. Let's keep going. We're going to talk about something called first class functions. Does anyone know what that is? Hmm? What is it? Straight from the docs, right? A programming language is said to have first-class functions if the functions are treated like any other variable. What does that mean? That means I can pass these functions around as arguments. I can assign these functions to other variables, just like I can assign variables to variables in any other language. Cool? A language that has first-class functions is that a function can be returned by another function, or it could be assigned as a value to a variable. We've seen this already, right? Literally this. Instead of function hoist var, I can simply let hoist var equals to this function, right? Is there a difference between the two? We kind of learned, remember, how the code reads. The function keyword, well, let me ask you this. Will this hoist?
No.
Why?
Because you signed it let.
Will that hoist?
Yes.
Difference, right? There's also one big difference you'll learn later on, and it's about how this is assigned, but that's for another lecture. That's literally an entire hour and a half lecture. Cool? So, if I were to say a JavaScript has functions as first-class citizens, will that make sense to you? JavaScript is a first-class, treats its functions like first-class citizens. Cool? It simply means that I can assign functions as variables, and I can return functions from another function. Cool? Great. So let's do this. Cool. Here I have const hamburger is a function, and it simply returns cheese and nice. I can have another higher order function, right? Do you want me to define that for you right now? What is the official definition? I just want to make sure I have the official definition because I keep asking you to use like the right things to say. Ugh. Come on. Oh no. Damn. That's a funny joke. All right, here we go. Someone sent this to me already.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. This will make more sense in a second. So a higher order function is simply a function that accepts another function as a callback or returns the value of another function. Returns another function as return value. Does that make sense? And why that I needed to make that correction? Great. If I were to console log higher order, right? Let me just add some spaces in here so you can see. Remember, JavaScript is sort of space agnostic, right? Because of the way the syntax parser understands it. It's just going to go, great, I have a console log. That's a function. It's being invoked with space, 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 H, I, G, H. It will ignore all of these. That's why it works, because the syntax parser is ignoring it. Cool? So, higher order function is being what? Referenced or invoked here? It's being invoked, but what is the argument I'm passing in? I'm passing it a variable. Any old variable, except this variable is a function. In here, when I invoke it, this takes an argument. That argument is going to be hamburger, which is just a function. So here, essentially, translated, I'm going to have hamburger, specifically being invoked. Are there any questions as to this taking in a function and then that function being invoked? Yes?
Do you have to use like callback?
No, this could be anything, right?
Okay.
This could be just
Is
args,
best practice?
an argument, all right? When a function is being passed in as an argument, it is called a callback. Because when this function, when higher order executes, it's getting another argument as a function. It's going to execute this callback function. I'm simply calling it callback so you can see it. Normally, it's abbreviated. Like what you'll see is, you'll see this, callback.
Is it convention to always do that so that when you're reading your code, it's easy?
No, what convention is that it will be whatever it does.
So like, but then you can't compare.
So like here, it'll just be like a cheesy function or something. Like whatever this function is intended to do is what it will be named.
Okay, so it's just being called callback for the sake of us learning that it's a callback.
Right. When you don't know what you need, you can simply generically name it callback. Because what you'll see is, in the next example, that those functions can do other things with it. Sweet. So what should I see in this console log? Who thinks cheese and nice? All right. Who likes being upset? Great. So 180, right? 180 says undefined. I might be frustrated at this moment, but I'm not a quitter and I love JavaScript. All right? That's probably what you're going to say to yourself, naturally. Let's find out what's happening. Console log is executing this higher order function. Right? Great. This higher order function takes a callback, and that callback gets invoked. That callback, which again is hamburger here, returns cheese and nice. But what does higher order return? Undefined. Yes? Okay, do not be upset, do not be alarmed. Undefined is kind of your friend. But just remember, what does your function return? Cool? If some of you were really slick, I deleted it right before I uncommented it on purpose, just because I needed to prove this point. Yeah? Remember what you're returning. JavaScript explicit returns. Cool. So, let's get rid of this because this is nonsense. Trash. Great. Higher order functions and closures. Here. Closures has an amazing definition. This is callback function. Great. A closure is, according to MDN, right, aka the Bible of JavaScript, is the combination of a function and the lexical environment within which that function was declared. That sounds like a mouthful, but we can break it down because we know what these words mean, right? Closure. What you could think of is this is a function that simply has another function being returned in it, and it has variables assigned to it. So, a closure is the combination of a function and the lexical environment within which that function was declared. So, what is the lexical environment in which this function is declared? It is within the scope of higher order James Bond. Can you follow me? Right? Again, this function, the lexical environment, is within the scope of higher order James Bond. So far, so good. If a closure is the combination of the function and the lexical environment, Is the closure simply this function?
No.
No, the closure is this function, and what is the lexical environment? This whole thing. And I know this because I can call movie inside this function, because does movie exist inside inner function? Yes. So this whole thing is a closure. This is what is known as a free variable. And if this inner function is using it, we say that it is being captured. One more time, because there was a lot of words here. Lexical environment of where this function is being defined is inside of here. The closure is all of the lexical environment and the function itself. This is a free variable because it is not defined inside, but it is being used inside, so it is being captured. Who feels comfortable with free variables, capture, closure? Yes, I'm looking for hands, I'm sorry. Who feels comfortable with those words that I just used? Captured, free variable, and closure. Okay, I need someone to explain it back. You can use any words you want. Try to explain closure. You can even use these right here. Does anyone want to go for it?
Well, can I ask a question for someone?
Absolutely not. Go ahead.
Okay, all right.
Go ahead.
So the inner functions within higher order James Bond, so the closure is everything in there, but since you could still pull it, use a global variable outside of the function, does that not count in the closure?
It does not count in the closure because movie does not exist out here.
Right, the other way, but it's something, a global variable outside the function that you could call inside of the
Well,
function?
basically, the closure goes up until it's wrapped.
Okay.
Okay? So if I had more in here, like more consts, right? This would be part of the closure, and is known as what? A free variable. Is it being used in here? So, is this captured? It is not captured, but it can be because it is a free variable. Are we cool with that? Cool. So we don't need that. Now, earlier we alluded to why you can have pass by reference and pass by value. Here, I have a bad Bond movie. It simply invokes this function. Remember, I've got my returns. So does this function return anything? Does this function return anything? Yes. Return. Cool. And does this function return anything? Yes, return. So my returns are good to go. I'm checked. I simply say const bad Bond movie, right? Because we all know that the one with the Ice Palace and Halle Berry was terrible. And this is being invoked. What is going to be the value of this const, bad Bond movie? It's going to be, let's find out. Oop. Weird, right? Because look, movie is defined here and then used as an interpolated variable. It is being captured and utilized. But I invoke this with no arguments, and movie is being captured. So even though it is being interpolated here, the whole thing gets saved as the return value. Do you see that? So now let's take it one more time, and let's just say I take in a movie object or a string, and I no longer put this in. what can I do? Can I do const fav bond movie, oops, sorry, equals to higher order James Bond, passing it in GoldenEye? What will happen?
My favorite James Bond film is GoldenEye.
Let's find out. Oops.
Oh, yeah, you need to you have to use the parentheses on function.
All right, I didn't invoke it yet. I have GoldenEye. Right? Why did this become undefined? Because I didn't pass anything in here. Right? There's nothing in here. So if there's nothing in here, movie becomes undefined, which means that when it gets passed in here, it's undefined. So there are very important takeaways from this example, and then I will let your brain rest. Cool? First thing is, inside my closure, I have access to variables that were declared. I have access to arguments, and I have access to anything that was declared within the inner scope of that function. Cool? So whatever is available inside here, whatever gets passed in here, and whatever is available globally inside this inner function. Does everyone understand that scope and the scope chain of what this has access to? Yes? Different from Ruby. This expects how many arguments? How many arguments did I pass it? Did it throw an error? No. It said, oh, movie, you're giving me nothing. So movie must be undefined, and it will pass in undefined. It will execute silently. So just be aware. This is why I kept telling you the process in JavaScript is so important, because when you see undefined here, you're going to be like, huh? But because you know what you're doing in JavaScript, you should be able to debug it. Therefore, when I assign this and I assign this, fav bond movie is now this with GoldenEye.
Can you say that again? What do you mean by when you assign this?
When I assign the const fav bond movie to the invocation of higher order James Bond, passing it in the string GoldenEye, the closure has access to the arguments passed in. It is captured and returned.
Where is movie captured?
Literally right here.
Oh,
Because I'm passing it in
yeah,
here.
I see. It's just a generic.
No, you're good. I mean, it could be kind of tricky, right? Because I'm passing it in GoldenEye here. So GoldenEye is getting passed in. This has access to it. It's being captured and then being assigned. This is going to be the value of the return here. And I just showed you what happens if I do not invoke it. I get what? A reference to fav bond movie. Just the function. Cool? And then naturally, if I also do not return this, rather invoke it, what will happen? This whole function gets assigned here, and then this whole function is never invoked, will refer to this. So, when you define things, when you declare them, when you invoke them, are all different and can all have dramatic effects on your code. Is everyone cool with higher order functions, closures, free variables, capturing, and scope? Yes. Oh, okay, sorry, my bad. Just a quick thumbs up if all of that at least made sense and you have some semblance of how you can explain it or write or run through examples. At a bare minimum, if you were to see code would you be able to debug undefined? And would you be able to understand the scope of which a function has access to its variables? Would you be able to see it? That's the main goal. Great. That's all I have for you today.